Awesome. And we're live. Thank you everyone for joining. We are recording live, but we're going to stream it after.
Okay, awesome.
Just for everyone that thinks they're watching us live right now, it is live. And you can drop questions in the comments for sure, but we'll address them maybe later. So Joel from Hirewell, mate, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, great to be here, Lewis. And we were just chatting offline about how we met, a year and a half ago now?
Yeah. Since then, we brought 2 new lives into the world, one each.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, all about recruiting people to join the world. That's what we do in our free time.
Yeah, all good fun. I love it. How are you? So when we met, you were working for a marketing agency.
Yeah.
For recruiting, and then you joined Hirewell.
Yeah.
Since then.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So I was working with Hoxo, which is probably more well known in the UK than the US. But we had the vision of kind of building out a coaching and training course for recruiters, and just helping them brand themselves on LinkedIn. And so I worked with them, and really just got to a point where like you mentioned, had a child in the last year, and just needed something that was more just based in the US. And I'd connected with Hirewell over the years just through content. I don't know if you've seen any of their content, but really, they're just really consistent with putting out content across the board. So I connected with one of the partners, and they're like, yeah, we're looking to grow our HR team. And since you are connected to so many recruiters, maybe recruiting recruiters is a good way to go. So I've been doing your content 9 months.
It's great. And your content if you're not following Joel, follow him. It's funny recruitment content. And you always get it spot on. I really enjoy it. I really do enjoy it. So you grind out at least a post or 2 a day, which is great.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I think when we had originally talked, or when we originally met, I was actually posting 3 to 4 times a day, 7 days a week, and now I've kind of come to the realization that it really is to do with the quality of the post, and obviously quality is pretty subjective, but I definitely have taken the angle of let's make relatable content for recruiters, and it's really kind of taken off, particularly in the last 9 months. But also now definitely looking to potentially switch up a little bit of the content strategy, which I think just happens over time. I think the more you do content, the more you realize you can change, you can switch things up. So excited about that as well.
Interesting. So you were, because you've gone from a quantity to quality vibe now.
Yeah, and I think part of that was
not that it wasn't quality, but it's you're spending now more thought and time on each piece of content than you did before.
I mean, it's funny because how it all started out was I was looking at the content I was putting out, and at that time I was with Hoxo, and I'm like, our major target was agency recruiting firms, and it was obviously the main people I wanted to talk to were people like yourself that owned a recruiting firm, that were looking to grow the business. But I just noticed, I was like, man, the engagement that I'm getting, because I was talking a lot about recruiters having, you need to create content on LinkedIn. So that was what I was talking about a lot. But I just noticed that a lot of the actual recruitment leaders I was looking to engage with, they just weren't engaging on the content. And I just put that down to they're not seeing the content. So I thought, well, what's the best way for them to see for them just to see who I am, not necessarily even the content, but then just to get an awareness of who I was. And I was like, well, if I could get, 10 recruiters at an agency to like a post, chances are that's going to end up on the newsfeed of a recruitment owner. They'd click, who is this guy? Click on a profile, and then I'd be able to, kind of sell them on the profile. Yeah. And so the first post that I did like that, I just was like, what are recruiters like? Well, everybody in recruiting I've ever met has a sense of humor. We're funny, and you have to be, because you just people will just screw you over, and obviously there's just so many situations that happen where if you don't have a sense of humor, you're gonna have a hard time. So I kind of actually I just thought of who's somebody who's really big on LinkedIn. It's kind of in recruiting. But Adam Karpiak, he's just obviously a really well-known name, got hundreds of thousands of followers. And a lot of what he posts is just humorous stuff for job seekers. So I thought, why don't I attack it from another angle and just talk about the frustrations that we can have as recruiters, and kind of, again, aiming at not necessarily the recruitment leader of the organization, but recruiters. But if they start liking my posts, get on the radar of leaders. And so I did a post, and I think it ended up getting like 2 or 3 million views. And I was like, okay, I'm onto something. And so I kind of continued doing that, because I was like, one thing I've learned about social media is if you go viral and it's something that you've like thought about and you've controlled, then you can kind of just keep doing it.
Yeah.
And so I've kept doing it. And so I went from 0 to 60,000 followers, I think, in the first 2.5 years I was on LinkedIn. And then now, 60 to 130,000 followers in 6 months, because I changed the content strategy. But now I'm looking at it and going, okay. And a part of that too, it actually saved me a lot of time, because the content, there was a period of time where I was doing a lot of like tweets, kind of taking tweets as well that did well on like Twitter.
Pictures of the tweets and posting on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And again, like I kind of replaced my activity on LinkedIn, because I was posting 2 to 3 times a day, and actually went over to Twitter to do that, because Twitter makes a lot more sense to post multiple times a day. And then what I do is like test the content on Twitter. So if something does well on Twitter, I can know that it's going to do well on LinkedIn.
All right.
Screenshot it, and then I can build out a little bit more of a written post on top of those screenshots. But I'd say I'm probably spending less time now on content than I was before.
Because you've reached a good following where.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like less time. And I think there was a point where I was spending 8.5 hours on content a day, and just content and engaging and just like really throwing myself into it. And now I would say like anyone who's just starting off, I'd probably lean more towards like where I am now, where it's like, if you have 3 to 5 solid posts a week, and you kind of vary up what you're talking about. And again, like I used to post a lot of personal content. I don't post any personal content anymore, because those posts, they don't do as well as like my non-personal posts, which is an interesting switch, because for most people, it's the personal posts that do really well.
It's the pictures, the family stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. But then you're doing funny, relevant, educational content for your audience.
Yeah, and still, I think there's still like a little bit of snark in there. So there's definitely like a personality play where, like I did a post yesterday where, I don't know if you saw that, there's a guy that posted something saying basically like remote workers are fat, right? Like remote workers
I saw that.
And lazy. So then I took that and said, yeah, we are, remote workers are fat. Like our wallets are fatter because we're not wasting time in the car. And then I kind of got a little bit snarky with it. But I think it's just like, that's what people have grown to expect from me. And so where does it go? Where does it go from here? We'll see. I think with Hirewell, like I said, I'm recruiting recruiters right now. Yeah. Probably going to be switching more into a business development role over the next month, and just helping grow the business and leveraging that platform. So I think we'll start to see a little bit of a change with what I'm doing. I'd love to do more. I'd love to set up another live stream. Like I was doing live streaming for about 1.5 years. Stop that. And now I'm looking to get back into doing that.
So your most of your content is written and a visual of some sort.
100%.
And then not much video. How come you decided to focus on the?
It's just where I was family wise, to be honest. Okay. Like you know how it is when you have a newborn. I mean, obviously you got more kids than me, so it's time consuming. And I was kind of in the middle of like a flux of. I just bought a house. So like I've got like a dedicated office space, and for about 9 months, I just didn't really have a space to make videos where it was quiet. So, I've been pretty sparse with the video content, but what I'll be launching, probably in the next month or so here is, a recruiting live stream, maybe an ask me kind of anything type thing as well. Cause I know lots of people have questions, but I think it evolves. It evolves over time,
Yeah, love it. Relating that to like folks that aren't in recruiting but content, I think the value of content's incredible, right? Like we're talking a little bit about the way a job search and how to find a job and stuff nowadays. And for LinkedIn's incredible. I mean, it's completely free for you to post, and
blows my mind.
You can reach. it's crazy, right? And you can reach, I mean, you mentioned one post reached 1 million folks. I mean, you could do that with very few followers or connections. You just write something that hits a vein.
Exactly.
And it goes out to folks. And so, for general, like to promote your career and to connect with the right folks and to be found by recruiters and seen by people, dive on LinkedIn. Don't worry about the follows and the likes and the comments and stuff, but just, contribute to the conversation. And it's such a powerful thing to do. I always think it's the modern day cocktail party. You haven't got to leave your bedroom.
I mean, that's what it is. But I think it's just changed in a way. It's changed really, really quickly, kind of changed in sync with everything that happened with the pandemic as well. But I think to your point, like it's the followers and the likes, I think. And I think that's the only thing which I kind of struggle with is I mean, if you look at recruiting or you look at anything that's consulting based, or if you're like a solopreneur, for example, you don't really need that many. You need, let's say if you're a recruiter, if you had 7 clients that you were averaging 25 to 50K a year with, you're doing okay, and obviously you can build that up. Let's say you have 10 clients and each are doing 50K. Okay. Now you're billing $500,000. It's 10 clients. So when people are like, yeah, I'm only getting 3 likes. I'm like, great, convert on one of those likes. Like convert on one. If you converted on, if you posted every day and you got 10 likes on each post and you got, let's say 200 likes throughout the month, and you could convert on, a couple, 10% of those, you're already going to be overwhelmed with work. So that's like this weird fascination with follower accounts, like amounts, where it's like most of us, we need like a handful of really like reliable clients that we can work with. And the same with candidates. Like if I was to say, hey, you can get 5 quality candidates a month coming inbound, and you really don't need 1 million likes, you don't need to spend hours of time. Obviously it makes sense, but I think people get enamored with LinkedIn coaches, people like myself, they look, oh, you get thousands of likes. Like, so one of my team was like, you must never have to recruit. And I'm like, well, it's not that simple. Like for me, what I've realized is like the likes and the awareness are really helpful in my outbound because people have a sense of who I am, but you don't need to have it scaled like that. What you really need is you need a really, really highly targeted market. And if you've got a network of 1,000 CEOs, let's say, that maybe never engage with your post, but they see it regularly enough, that's probably more powerful than having 100,000 followers that are just like random, that just liked one post that you did once and aren't really engaged in what you're saying. So
no, it's true. I think it's
exactly.
You're completely right. I think the focus should be quality educational content, like quality content for your audience, whatever that might be. I mean, for us, it's recruiting. I talk a lot about all the different topics related to recruiting or finding a job or feedback or ghosting or whatever it is, right? All of these different kind of topics. I do it through video, live streams, written, whatever it might be. But you're right. Like you probably don't even need 10 clients. You have a couple of big clients.
Exactly.
Let's be honest, right? You have 1 or 2 really big customers and who give you regular work, and you can make a really nice business for yourself. And the point of the content for me is really gaining more credibility, right? Being seen as an expert in your field. And when someone thinks about, I've got a big problem, I need to find, X, Y, Z, you pop into their mind, or they visit your profile and they're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And they kind of see some of the things you're talking about. And it gives you this, it's like the digital first impression, because everyone checks you out on LinkedIn first.
Exactly. But and I think that's maybe where I had a little bit of, and again, you can change the strategy and what you're doing. And that's probably where like, okay, Art is putting out like comedic memes, a way to build like good business credibility. I'm like, I don't know, but there's something to be said for just general awareness as well. And I think that's where it's finding the balance and then understanding like, maybe I go through a phase in the next year where it's just purely live feeds and, talking shop. I think that's the beauty with content. Like I'm going to be creating content for the rest of my career, and whether that it stays on LinkedIn for a while and then moves into some like metaverse or whatever, it's just an act of understanding that, like you said at the beginning, it's literally free advertising. It's a way, like like 10 years ago, recruiters would have dreamed of a way in 2 minutes to reach 2,000 people. But the problem is like when you talk to people, they're like, yeah, I just don't know, or like I don't feel comfortable putting myself out there. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is the same recruiter that like will make 500 cold calls fearlessly and doesn't care. You're telling me that you really care about that you're afraid of what people might think. It just kind of blows my mind. But I think I think there's a lot of misconceptions with it as well, where it's like, you have to know who you are as well within it. And so like, if you're a junior recruiter, I'm not suggesting like putting yourself out there as like a recruiting guru, but you can still talk about experiences. You can still talk about things that are relevant and attract people still. So
I mean, you're on the front line. You're doing your job and you're experiencing stuff. And there's so many things that happen doing our job, and people like to hear about it.
Exactly.
And it is funny. Like, people aren't confident doing it, but they are confident picking the phone up, and they don't mind about the no's, and that and they get resilient on it. But I don't know what it is about. It feels almost easier. Just you write something and you press post, and you can run away and then check back a few hours later and see what's going on. But it's when I started in recruiting, which is back in 2006 or something, it was like Yellow Pages, no LinkedIn, and it was 100 calls a day. If you didn't make 100 calls a day, they'd take your chair away and you have to stand the next day. Some guy got the headset sellotape to their head. I mean, it was just like back in the day, it was crazy. But now it's just changed incredibly. Like, for us, we do exec search. It's all relationship driven. It's people, and something like LinkedIn, you're able to get in front of folks without selling anything.
Exactly.
Like my content and yours too. You're not selling inadvertently. You're just giving content for free, and if it helps a few folks, awesome. And it's also really good fun.
I think that's where I think that's a big piece of it though too. Like, you have to have fun with it if you're going to be consistent. But it's the same with recruiting. It's like, again, going back to the cold calling, it's like, you're only going to be really successful with cold calling like if there's part of you that enjoys cold calling, or like enjoys a part of it. And it's like, we're only, it's the same with recruiting as a whole. Like, there's no way you're going to last in recruiting if you don't enjoy it. And if you talk to someone who's a year or two in, you can just tell either they are like in love with what they're doing and they're excited every day, or it's just, not a fit for them. And I think with content, like, I just was like, oh, I really enjoy writing. It's funny, like Sean over at Hoxo, like, he's really, really like video based and like loves video. He's not so much of a writer, and I'm more of a writer. And I think that's a cool thing with social media. Is it's like, you don't have to get on video if you don't want to. You can get on video if you want to, but you can go on Twitter and you can just type in like little like thoughts, and it's it's all the kind of same. But I think the trouble is it gets into like where people start thinking they have to do something as well, and they're like, oh, I have to get on TikTok. And it's like, I'm on TikTok. I got 13,000 followers, but I don't actually produce a lot of content on there anymore, because I was like, this isn't really like what I even enjoy doing. And so I think you have to enjoy it. You have to have fun. And I think it's the same with recruiting though. It's the same thing where it's like, if you don't actually care about the clients you're working with, if you don't care about the problems that you're solving, you're not going to enjoy the conversations, and you're not going to enjoy it. So it's the same thing. And to your point too, I think like, particularly over the last couple of years, I think we're seeing a lot more like newer recruiters jumping on the social media and LinkedIn. Like, I see a lot more recruiters that are probably at 0 to 5 years creating content. And to me, that signals like, it's kind of like what the future is going to be. And candidates will look at what podcasts you've done. Like, are you doing anything? And they want to get to know you a little bit. They want to do their homework before they talk to you. It's just kind of the way it's moving. And, I'm a fan
also
of it.
such a, and also, if you do like the cold calling, it supplements it amazingly.
Exactly.
I mean,
and you have to do that. You have to do that. You have to call. You're not getting results on something. Then it's like, if the in-mail or your email or whatever hasn't worked, and your content isn't bringing in the right candidates, what do? Okay, you start calling people. Everything works
For me, it's like, yeah. For me, it's not like or, it's and. It's like that works, and that works, and that works, and that works. And there's so many ways to do it now. I think in recruiting, it's great. Like if you've made it to year 5, you're probably enjoying it. And these tools are just so. I mean, LinkedIn is just so wonderful to really start to, to keep growing, because in our industry, it gets better and better the longer you stay in it.
100%. And I just did a post about that today. It's like,
oh, did you?
Well, the post was like 90% of recruiting is timing, and it's like,
oh yeah,
people, why is it a big fee? And it's like, well, you're not paying for like the 3 people that you're getting or the 4 people that you're getting through. You're actually paying for the years of just conversations, because most of the time, it's somebody that you talked to a couple of years ago, or maybe it's someone in the moment you're reaching out to, but can't really rely on just look and the timing of it being just 100% right for somebody. And I think that's where, obviously the longer you're doing something and you're focused on it, the bigger your network is going to be. And, again, that's where like LinkedIn is powerful, because you can just show up every day. People get familiar, they know you. And so many times I reach out to people and they're like, oh my gosh, like it feels like I got a celebrity reaching out to me, and I'm like, well, that's really sad. And I'm gonna.
But that's the power, though. That's the power. They know, if you're in it a long time. I mean, recruitment is all timing for sure, but also the point is that you age with your network as well. And if you start, you start young, and maybe you start doing contingent recruiting, and you're doing kind of mid, juniorist level, and then you start to, you can start to progress, and these folks you might be placing multiple times. They become hiring managers. They're consuming your content. You're also speaking with them. You may be taking them out for a coffee. You meet them for lunch. All of this kind of stuff. You meet them in the metaverse, and suddenly they'll be like, a CEO, and you're their guy or girl.
I love that.
It's a good long. It's a bit of, it's like cliche, I know, but like patience, and it's a long-term thing, and you definitely, it gets better as you longer you stay in it.
Which I would think that. I mean, I just think of it like same with like financial advising or something. It's like, it sucks when you start off because you didn't know anybody and everything is cold and outbound. But if you're 5 years and you're still like cold calling out 300 times a day, I'd probably question like, okay, what about the other? How have you been building relationships for the last 5 years? And that was actually a challenge. I think kind of beginning out, because I was out of recruiting for about 2 years and then getting back in. And obviously, like, it definitely helps, like, having a visibility with a lot of recruiters, since I'm recruiting mainly recruiters and HR folk. But, like, again, like, the power of the network is, there's people on my team that they've just been doing it for 10 years. And obviously they're billing more than I am, even though I've got, lots of followers and that type of thing. But it's because, like, ultimately it's always going to be a relationship game, and people aren't going to do business unless there's a relationship there. Really, no matter how good your content is. But obviously having a nice funnel of 20 to 30 people a week that you don't have to reach out to is beneficial. And
definitely, you should just try and use all the tools available, and phone, face-to-face meetings, content, it's free. If you're using all of that stuff and you do it regularly for a long period of time, it's an incredible career.
100%.
You can make some great friends, you can make money, and all of that stuff. I think it's awesome. How are you finding the market now? Because we spoke about this just before we pressed record, and feels like a funny moment right now. Like for us, since probably August 2020, like every recruiter, it's been like one of the busiest moments ever. And like everything's cyclical, and it feels like maybe we're approaching a little kind of change. Some of the tech firms have been making some redundancies. Coinbase rescinded offers. How are you finding it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're an internal recruiter, you're a cost center at the end of the day. So I think as an internal recruiter, unless you're like the leader within the company, it probably is a little bit scary right now. And, especially if you're in tech, and you're at a firm that just has gotten around to funding, or you're in a market like real estate, obviously right now, or crypto, or any of these really volatile industries, we're starting to see like obviously a lot of uncertainty with anything that's volatile. So,
Yeah.
But I think the saving grace for recruiters as a whole is there's still just so many job openings, and there's literally not enough people to do the work that companies feel like are qualified. And it's a weird dichotomy because there's a lot of people on the market right now that are looking for jobs, but they just don't have necessarily the skill sets that are in demand. So, definitely everything you're saying, I think is right. I think social media is playing a really weird part in this as well. And I think LinkedIn is kind of not necessarily the.
So you mean kind of over egging it a little bit.
And if you go on your LinkedIn, like for example, you go on a LinkedIn, you see, on desktop, you've got your homepage, and then you see the news. It's like every single time there's a layoff, they're letting you know. And the reality is, if you just go back and look at the data, and I know like our team did this, we're still not at anywhere near the point of layoffs and cuts that we were in 2020, but people are a lot more vocal about it. And it's not just like LinkedIn news necessarily. It's like if a recruiter gets laid off nowadays, what do? They post about it on LinkedIn. So you start seeing a lot, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's like my whole news feed is layoffs, but it's really small. I think it's a small,
It's true, because like a few months ago, it was congratulations, new job. Everyone seemed to have moved, like, like last year, and now it's people are vocal, like, oh, I've left. And then it gets, especially if it gets a lot of traction and you just see these things in the newsfeed, and a lot of people get outraged by things, they got cut, and it gets a bit, people are like commenting, I can't believe it. You know what I mean?
Like I've ripped on it a little bit, where it's like, particularly with like I think it's just because when you're on the agency side and you're just dealing with clients all the time, like I would say the bulk of the clients that we work with are tech startups that have just gotten their Series A, B, or C funding, and it's like you just hear the conversation in a kickoff meeting where it's like it's almost like you could just predict what's going to be said in some of these meetings where. Yeah, we just received our funding, so we're going to go into hypergrowth, and we're going to hire, 200 more people, and we've only got 40 people right now, but we need to triple in size. We need to quadruple in size. And you're just thinking, like, do you know how hard it is to like hire some of this tech talent, and like who you're going up against? Like, it's great, and I'm glad you're thinking about growth, but 20% growth is still good growth. Like, it doesn't have to be 280% growth, but then obviously it's like, let's bulk up the recruiting team. And we've got all this money, so we can pay them a lot more than they're making. And so it's like, kind of feel bad in some ways when, it's like you see an internal recruiter, is making, they're getting a 60 to 80K raise or whatever that is, they're doubling their salary, let's say, with the overall package. And then 9 months later, I can't believe I'm writing this, they laid off. And it's like, well, when you think about these huge numbers that companies are putting out there, and like doubling a company in size is easy if you've got 2 people, because you're only adding 2 more people.
Yeah.
You got 400 people and you're looking to triple in size. It's very hard. And, it's like you don't have the marketing, you don't have the brand name, probably don't have the money to even pay people and be competitive compared to big tech. So it's like, it's great when you hear that. And obviously, if you're interviewing with a company as a recruiter and they say, yeah, we've got these growth goals, that's great. But it's like, everybody had these growth goals. And then it's like, now it's like, because social media makes it so easy to find out information. It's like suddenly like 3 firms, or like Meta, Facebook says, we're going to have a hiring freeze, and everybody's seeing the same thing. So then everybody thinks, oh, wow, like we're in a super dark time. And
just be careful. Yeah. And some of the VCs are like, okay, just chill out. Let's see some profit. But the funny thing is, I mean, everyone thinks they can do recruiting better than a recruiter, and it's like, it's really hard to raise money, which I'm sure it is. Yeah. But suddenly, it's really hard to attract people. Like, recruiting's tough, especially when the people you're looking for are in high demand. To your point, these are high in demand people, and you got to get your story right. Like everyone's raised money, everyone's got a call. It's like. It's
like really saying like, hey, we just raised $80 million in our Series D funding. I mean, that really is. It doesn't mean that much. Not when you're looking down a newsfeed and you're seeing like companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars and never turned a profit, and then now they're letting go of people. It's like probably a bigger flex now is, or like a bigger selling point is, we've been around in business for 120 years and we've had steady growth and we're conservative with what we're going.
Yeah.
Would you like to join our team? Yes, I would. And obviously there's like an allure with like everybody wants to, be part of like an IPO and things like that, which is great. And I'm glad that, we're seeing that, but I honestly think that's what we're seeing. And it's the toughest point, I think, is when you see somebody who's been at a company for a long time, they make a move, they get a pay bump, and then, obviously a layoff happens. But and I've made posts about it. Like, I thought, well, you should be asking better questions during an interview. Like you should be asking how many recs you're recruiting on. Like, what's the company growth forecast? Like, when's the last time you reviewed the growth forecast? But the reality is, it is so hard in an interview to vet that out because probably the people interviewing don't really know.
They might not know.
Something they probably don't know.
And
because if they did, I don't
VCs,
think they would
they
sell
don't
it
know.
so hard.
And maybe the VCs turn around next week and say, sorry, guys, TAP's returning them off. And then they're like, oh, okay, I've got, so it's hard. I mean, definitely like you can give yourself the best chance by asking the right questions. So, I mean, everyone can do better at that, right? Like you can interview your potential employer better, but sometimes you just don't know.
Which is obviously, we see that as recruiters all the time, particularly on the agency side, where like we've all placed somebody and then gotten that dreaded call of like, yeah, actually they're going to be letting people go and I'm back on the market. And, and you kind of feel maybe then a little bit guilty of like, oh man, I placed them. But at the end of the day, it's like you can ask the better questions and you can do your research. You can look at it and go, okay, hey, we've got, 30 openings in this level and we've got a team of 17 recruiters. I probably don't want to be the 18th recruiter there, like at this point. But it's, I think, again, what's been very hard too, and I've seen this because most recruiters, once I get down to offer stage, have 3 or 4 different offers. Yeah. The money that has been getting thrown around, like I'm not saying recruiters aren't worth it. We are, but it's like that, the salary bumps have just been over the last year have been crazy. And at the end of the day, the rule is always the same, where like if you are the most expensive person and you're the newest person and you're maybe making more than people who are higher than you, have been longer at the company, you're susceptible. And I'm not saying
if you're
less money.
If you're that person and you hear rumors of redundancies, you're going to be in 5 days a week or still working full time at home?
Yeah, well. Exactly.
I posted about this today. It's like, it's a kind of tongue-in-cheek thing, but it's like my point was, that this work from home thing's wonderful, when we're fully remote and stuff. But if you do hear of redundancies and you sit and you hear your team going in and you've got to pay the bills, are you going to be cool with staying at home knowing that you're incredible at your job, or just wandering in for FaceTime just in case?
Yeah, it's tough. And I think, and again, we've had such a candidate driven market over the last 2 years as well, or, at least the last year, that, hey, that pendulum starts to shift the other way, which it always does with everything. Yeah. It's just always kind of has these shifts, but it's like starts to shift back to the employer. And suddenly, there's a lot more now, I think, more vocal leaders saying, hey, we got to, return to the office, or like hybrid, so I just read something where it's like hybrid is going to be extinct. And I mean, to me, I'm like, well, maybe. And like, I don't really have anything against like in office or remote. Like I don't really have that stronger feelings. At the end of the day, I think if my office was closer, I mean, I'm about an hour and a half away from my office. If it was closer, I probably would go there a couple times a week just to get out of the house with 3 kids. But, like you said, as that pendulum starts to shift, are you going to have candidates demanding, the top of the range every time? Are they going to do this? Like, will there be some leveling out?
Yeah.
Potentially. But I think it's like each person, you've got to make that decision and you've got to be smart. I'm not saying accept less money or, just completely cancel the work from home. But, hey, it gets more competitive. And if they want somebody in the office and it's a competitive job market, they'll find somebody that will go into the office for.
That's true.
Money.
Yeah.
And it's like, even if you are great at what you do, there's probably other people who maybe aren't as great, but they're maybe willing to do other things that you aren't, and maybe they start.
Yeah, you got to make a call on it for sure. I think also you're right. Like some of these tech firms, they were paying a lot, and there's something to be said for like a good, solid, established, 150-year-old firm that's just it's not sexy. They might not post as much on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, because like you get attracted to these tech firms because that you're kind of like the modern day rock star, aren't you? I mean, I'm like working super hyper growth, and like they're going to sell soon.
Oh, dude, the fascination. Well, the fascination with like the tech industry, and I think is really interesting just in general, where like there's almost like a worshiping that goes on of like FANG, like and you see it with mostly like probably new grads where they're like, oh, I've got to land a job at Amazon, I got to be able to put X Google on my profile. And hey, it is great, and those companies are really hard to get into, and I'm not taking anything away from that, but at the same time, I think my mindset has always been like, hey, you've got to provide, and it's particularly the role that I play in my family. Like, I'm the provider, I'm the main provider. So, hey, if it comes down to it and I got to do something I don't like for a period of time, I will do something I don't like to earn the money. And I think, we've got this like fascination with tech, with startups, with all this sort of stuff. And then now, like, I just think like, candidates, they do expect more, which isn't a bad thing. Like, that's okay. But I do think that there might be some kind of a balancing with that, where like as an entry level or like kind of junior in your career, like, I don't know if we're going to be able to demand as much, but I'll still get behind it as well, because I kind of admire that. I kind of admire the fact that like people now, particularly candidates, like they are more willing to say like, hey, this is what I want, and they're not going to put up with the same crap.
You've got to know you've got to know your worth. Yeah, you've got to know your worth. And I think, I mean, recruiters have really risen in importance, but like their value in the market that it's been the last couple of years, there's been a lot of reliance on them. Like, it's hard to attract folks, and you've seen recruiter salaries go up and stuff. And rightly so, I think. I mean, and also it's funny because tech is sexy, and people want to work in a sexy industry. Like you want to go work for Google versus an insurance company. Like you just don't don't grow up saying, hey, I want to go work for, whatever, Berkshire Hathaway maybe, isn't, or, I want to go work for Google. And so you get sucked into this like real sexiness of an industry. But there's some great industries where they're complex, they're interesting, you can get wonderful experience, and people should be open to that. Don't get too sucked into that, like a Series B, the Series D.
Yeah, well, it's tough, and I think that's again like that's the impact of social media as well. Because I've seen a big rise on LinkedIn, where you get these job coaches that are like, yeah, I'll get you $50K more than you're earning, or like I've seen different job coaches where in their headline on LinkedIn it will be like, negotiated $1.5 million worth of like salary, more salary for people. And I'm like, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But it's like, it's also, it's like the simple fact is like, and I think this is something which people don't talk a lot about, but the more money you make and the more money you get paid, the more you're going to do. Like, it's not like you just get more money and then you end up doing less. It never works out that way. And like, no. I learned that lesson in a tough way when, I started my own business. It was like, I suddenly realized that like 40 hours wasn't going to cut it. And, it's like, you got to do whatever you have to do. And, but instead I'd fall in love with the kind of the Instagram and LinkedIn stories of like, yeah, I just, I did this and it was effortless and, I'll teach you how to do it type thing. And you kind of you buy into that. Same thing with tech. It's like, I think tech is a great industry to be in, but talk to anybody that's at a startup, particularly if you're like, let's say the only recruiter at a startup, you're working a lot. There's a lot of demands on you, and you're not always supported in the way that you would. Whereas like if you work at a really large company where things are already built out, hey, maybe you're getting paid a little bit less, but they're probably the stress level's less as well. So it depends where you're at in life as well, I think.
Do you know what? Also, a lot of people I've spoken to, not just in recruiting, but just generally, they'll take a pay cut to be more happy. Genuinely.
100%. Yeah.
People don't say that. I mean, you're not going to post that online. Hey, I took a pay cut.
I think I did actually post about that once, but you are right, though, 100%.
People are. Money, despite what you might think, is not the number one thing, and not the number one reason people are looking to move or necessarily taking a job. There's all these other aspects to it.
Yeah.
And
especially at the level that you're recruiting at too, with like executive level. I mean, there's a lot more that goes in, and it's like most people, once you're at a certain level of income for a period of time, like there's more stability there, so you're able to maybe take less money for a mission that you really care about. And obviously compensation always matters, but I mean, 100%. Yeah.
It's important. It's interesting though, because in the UK, like you ask candidates what they're earning, or when you apply for a job, like the company will say, "How much are you earning?" It's a bit odd not to say, right? And in America, pretty much it's illegal to ask anyone, right? You can't ask, which is really interesting because here, if someone's earning more money, people are always a little bit reluctant to hire them if the job pays less. It's like, oh, what happens if a bigger job comes up? Why do they want less money? That doesn't sound right. It's all a little, whereas in America, like you can't ask. It's just, what are your expectations? And maybe they offer what they're earning. Maybe they don't.
I think, it's so, because I saw someone actually post about that today from the UK. And I think she was like, stop criticizing people for asking what the salary is. And I didn't comment on it. Maybe I did, but yeah, I mean, like, I think the question I'm always asking is like, what are you targeting? But I also get a lot of information from that, because if somebody, let's say I'm working on a role that's 200K and it's a VP level role, and I reach out to them and then they're like, yeah, I'm looking for 90K. I'm probably like, okay, because that's actually targeting less. I'm actually thinking in my head, like, I don't know if they've done their research on like what these positions do, which to me, that actually means a lot, because then it's like, maybe you're not at the level of what they're looking for. And, and I guess also, sometimes there's a piece too, as like a recruiter, where you're talking to them and go, hey, well, you've been doing this for, 7 to 10 years. This is actually what the market's paying. So, I'd maybe be targeting a little bit more. So I it's a fine balance with that, but I get it a lot too, where maybe it's just because I'm recruiting recruiters in HR, but a lot of times like people are like, well, full transparency, this is what I'm making right now.
Oh, and they offer it up to you.
They offer it up. And at that point I'm like, I don't know if this really even helps me necessarily, because then it's like, you kind of know where they're at. And I don't know.
And you have a view. I mean, you kind of like automatically form a view, don't you? When you know
because I just think too, like, if depending on what the level of the role, there's something to be said with like negotiating skills, and like, it's like, are you that in tune with where the market's at, and like, how come you're at this level if like this, if like the actual levels here, like maybe there's an issue with
negotiating. Because you could say like, if you're slightly underpaid, you say, hey, unlike others, I've been really loyal to my company and I've stayed for like more than a year or two. And so I've only really got incremental pay increases. Because if you move, that's when you get your jumps.
Yeah, which is, again, it's just such a fascinating thing that's come up. And like, when you look, I've seen a lot more posts around like salary transparency, where you'll have like, Netflix engineers sharing how much they're making, or like, and the problem is like, I don't think, like, someone did one for recruiters recently as well, and it was like they just put these like salaries, and in my head I'm thinking these are a lot higher than the salaries that a lot of the companies I'm working with are willing to pay. But then it's like, you've really got to look at the whole data and look at like, okay, are we talking salary? Are we talking the overall picture? And like, to your point, like we've seen a lot more content around like, strategically making jumps to get more money. But then equally, like, you hear about people that end up getting that job at Amazon, or they end up, and it's like 2 to 3 years in, they're super burned out. And then it's going back to your point, like, is it really worth it? It's a lot going on.
It's a lot. Last thing on salary ranges before we jump off. So I saw your video you did with your colleague, which I loved. Salary ranges are great, right? Because here again, you haven't got to post them, but you ask someone, what are you looking for? Most people give a range.
Yeah.
I don't know why you'd give a range. It's like, I'm looking for, I don't know, 100 to 120. So to your video point, the client or you thinking, okay, 90. They're thinking, actually, I really want 130. What would your advice be? Don't give a range, give a number.
I think it's important. I mean, as someone who's interviewing, I think it's really important that you know the range, but you've also got to be aware that like the top of the range, you then need to look at the job description and, just look at the job description and look at how close you fit to it. And then you should have an idea of where you fall in the range. And what I mean by that is if they say that they're looking for 5 to 7 years of experience doing something, and you have 3 to 4 years of experience, you can't expect the top of the pay range because they're just going to go to that immediately and say, well, we were looking for 7 to 8. And they kind of, you can see that like it's down on paper. Now, obviously the challenge there is that somebody could be doing something for 7 to 8 years and just be really bad at it. And somebody could be doing something for a year or two and be really great at it. So it's kind of hard to conceptualize based on years of experience, but there's other things like looking at the overall responsibility or looking at the size of the company. So let's say you're working at a company with 500 people and they're a 10,000 person organization. And, it's like, I guess looking at the overall picture of the role and what you've actually done and what you can write down and say, okay, I'm an 80% match. Then when it comes to the job description or the salary range, you're then looking at 80% of what the top of the range is. And so I think like the problem is with the salary range is like, anybody who's a candidate that says 100 to 120, they're automatically mean 120. And it's the same with clients. So I think if you can pinpoint the number into a smaller range, it's better. But then I think also like just having the conversation earlier and just being really specific and not being afraid of talking about it is really, really important. And, just being reasonable with it as well.
Yeah. People often are a bit uncomfortable with talking about it. But if you want, you have a range in your mind, right? Like you'd be happy with X, you'd love Y, you walk away at, whatever. But I'm personally, I think give a number, maybe the middle of your range, which you'd be happy with. And maybe there's a bit of a negotiation to be had.
And that's it. That's the other thing too, is like whatever offer you get, you can always negotiate on it. But again, with that, it's like, just, if you really want the job, just be reasonable with it. It's like,
exactly.
And look at like, okay, are there other things that maybe I can negotiate that are non-monetary, or is there another benefit? Like maybe it's an extra day at home, if that's something you really care about, or an extra week of vacation. Like it's just looking at the overall package. But I do think that's the hard thing with the salary transparency with these ranges is you like whenever you say the range, the candidates go to the top, clients go to the bottom. And the bigger the range, the worse off you are.
Yeah. Who wants to get paid bottom of the range?
Again, the problem is then you're bottom of the range, It's the thing we're not thinking about is like, okay, hey, 100 to 120 and they offer you 100. They must not think you're that qualified then because they've given you the range of what the job is. So it's like,
but then take a moment.
That what people want?
And then take a moment to think about the people that have been there for 5 years. And it be even lower than the bottom of the range.
Exactly. And then it goes again, like looking at like, okay, if there is a change in the business, where am I sitting on that range? And just being smart that way. And these are tough things though. And I'm not saying these are easy or I even have all the answers because I certainly don't. But I think like being realistic and transparent is everything, and just looking at it like, at the end of the day, like when you're getting hired onto a business, you're hired on to help with the overall business, no matter what your role is. If you're an accountant, if you're a recruiter, if you're a salesperson, the goal is for you to come in and impact the business's bottom line in a positive direction and help the business. It's not all about how much you're going to get paid. And that's a big fact. You care a lot about that, but like the nature of business is like it's teamwork. So you got to be a team player at times. And again, I'm not saying lowball yourself, but it's just,
because also, there's so much stuff. Again, you can dive on LinkedIn and just consume content and look at what you should be paid and go on Glassdoor and whatever. I mean, you should educate yourself, and you know what you're worth broadly, and then go be dependable, work hard. Like just have a great ground game, and you have more opportunities available, and you progress. And
100%.
Love it. Joel, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here, and thanks for everybody who tuned in as well. Sorry we weren't answering the questions live, but
I hope there'll be some good stuff. We'll comment. Thank you very much, and everyone subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, even Twitter, Apple Podcasts, on LinkedIn as well. Thank you, everyone. And Joel, thanks so much for joining me, mate. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here. Great time.
Thank you.
We'll do it again.